Hello, Internet. I hope you guys are having a great Friday, and welcome to our live stream today, where we're going to preview some of the changes coming up in patch 0.8.0 for Farthest Frontier. How are you guys doing today? I see there's a lot of first-time chats. That's awesome. Welcome to the stream, guys. I hope I can answer some of your questions, at least the ones in English. I'm sorry, I don't speak German, but glad to see you guys hanging out from Europe. Let's see. We already have a question coming up. Wow! Like even before the stream started, you're ready. Uh, a mechanic for the trade center to be able to order specific goods for the next supply season with extra markup for balance to make the trading system more useful. That's actually exactly something we would like to add in the future. So stay tuned for that in upcoming updates. First time watching the stream, welcome. Whenever a burning house appears, all the villagers drop their stuff and sometimes it doesn't get picked up. Well, funny thing about that is that's exactly one of the things we're fixing in this update. So I'm over here in the town of Graveberg. It's in a wasteland. A lot of sand. So if you're not a fan of sand, because it's itchy and gets everywhere, you might not like this map. But we've made it work. We've made Graveberg work over here. Right off the bat, I have one thing to show you guys. It's one of the new buildings we're adding. There's a total of 12 buildings coming up in this update, mostly decorative stuff, so you can really spruce up your town in ways that you couldn't before. And here in the middle we have the festival pole. This is the tier 2 version of it, and this is one of the new entertainment buildings you can add to the game. Just bought this game yesterday, played a bit this morning. It's your first city builder too, look at that. Okay, I'm glad you did not give up because of being overwhelmed. So speaking of being overwhelmed, one of the things we have in this patch is that we've introduced a lot more tutorial stuff. So a lot of windows now that didn't previously have this, you can actually see information explaining how those windows work. And you'll see a little tidbit here that's just snuck in recently. For those of you that have already been playing, is that you'll now be able to shift click and control click these numbers to shrink them by larger increments. Which means if you want to get rid of 100 guards in the off season, you absolutely can't do that without clicking 100 times anymore. Just one little quality of life change that we snuck in this update. Audio is kind of low and game audio too high. Okay, let's switch that up. Turn game way down. Sorry, game music. I still hope that's a little better. Any plans for a preview map? I don't know if we'll be able to sneak that in. We'll see. I know exactly what you're talking about, and actually I think there's a utility someone made that does exactly that. Oh, it's a destroyed building. So one problem I've had in this wasteland is that there's very little water in this map. Like all my wells are almost always dry because there's just not enough water to go around. These people can't make their own beer because they don't have enough water. That's how rough things are. We're going to add biome types, for example, desert, swamps, mountains, and so on. Well, we already have those things. So, for example, I'm literally in a desert here. Like, there's sand everywhere. Yeah, no beer. Are we planning a console version? We are not planning a console version of Frontier now. I think I have a raid coming. Deploy the troops. Where are they coming from? There they are. It'll be okay. So right, as I was saying for some of the new V0.8 patch stuff, there's the tutorials, which actually, let me show you another one that's going to be really helpful for a lot of people that are starting this game out for the first time, is the crop field UI. This is one of the more advanced mechanics we have in the game, and it wasn't thoroughly explained. This should help people out a lot more, just kind of get their bearings on how this works. Looks like we have a little bit of a clipping issue here, though, that I'll have to address. We'll fix that after the stream. Do wells fill up when it rains? Logically, it should. They do actually get a bonus when it rains. It's currently not raining, obviously, but when it does rain, you will see a little text here that says that it's gaining bonus refill rate with rain. This makes you sad because it makes you feel there will be no more new Grim Dawn stuff, but this looks insane, so it helps ease this thing. Well, speaking of Grim Dawn, if you are a fan of Grim Dawn, and you haven't been paying attention to forum, we actually have something coming up. You guys have been asking for more merchandise, and we had a plushie. I think it was last year that came out. It was a Gazer Man. But here we have the Chthonian Devourer. So there's actually a giveaway that started up on Twitter right now that you guys can enter with Makeship. They're giving away 2 of these, so you have a chance to win this guy for free if you just get on Twitter. But the actual campaign will be starting in just about a week, and you guys will be able to buy this guy up. Oh, look, I looked away from the raid and it's already over. See, these guys got it. I think we did okay. Somehow I always manage to miss recording the fight on the stream. I'm an expert at that. Is this version 0.8? It is. So everything I'm doing in here is on the latest patch. I'm running a developer build which has slightly worse performance, but there's a reason for that and we'll get into it later because I want to use some dev cheats. Do we know the technical reason for why bridges are difficult to implement? It's a number of factors, one of which is just how pathing is calculated, how pathing was initially written for the game, and it's just a non-trivial thing. Other things are like, how do you reconcile when pathing updates over an area that's previously unpathable? Like, what are we going to do when there's boats? Are they going to just clip through a bridge? Or are we going to have some kind of mechanic to account for the fact that there's a bridge and they might have to go around it, or maybe they can't go through there at all? So there's a lot to reconcile there, and it's going to take a lot of work. It's something we're not going to sneak that in for early access. How to start, your 2 wishes are more music. You like the track, but it does get a bit old after a bit. I think the game has 8 or 10 tracks, so it does vary. But I can see how you'd want more. Different skins for houses and such. Each tier of housing has, I think, 4 skins, and they do get randomly selected when you place the houses. Oh, like different styles, like medieval Europe, medieval Africa, Asia, etc. Well, that would be almost like a total reskin for the game. Like we'd have to have like skin packs, themed ones, like an Asian frontier, African frontier, things like that. That might be cool to do, but I think that'd be more of a downloadable content thing. Like, do you want this skin like look for your town or not? More and bigger building, churches, cathedrals, mosques, synagogues, unnamed places of worship, castles, bathhouses. We would love to do that stuff too. And religion as a mechanic is something we want to actually flesh out and make interesting and interactive instead of sort of like entertainment where, you place a building and your villagers are entertained. Like, that's good that we have that system, but it's not as fleshed out as I think we'd like to make religion in the game. Is there video yet? You're just getting the load screen. If all you're seeing on the stream is a load screen, you might want to try reloading, because there's definitely a video playing now. You remember reading there's an issue of market workers working more efficiently. Is that something you can show? I'm not sure I could really show it to you. Let's see. But we did fix an issue where these guys were not stocking homes. So this guy is going over to stock the market over there with water, which he is then going to deliver to nearby homes, which does reduce the amount of time your villagers are spending doing their own stocking. So market grocers are taking care of stocking homes nearby, which means your villagers are spending less time stocking their own homes, which means then in turn they're spending more time doing the work you want them to be doing, producing logs, producing planks, producing clothing, things like that. Endgame, you cannot compensate for compost heaps. So you mean that you don't have enough of them, or they're filling up? Like, I'm not clear. So as of last update, compost yards no longer fill up completely. Like, they will keep working even if they're full. And you might need more of them than you think to cover your whole town. If they're not collecting waste, are you sure you're running the latest version of the game? Because that is definitely something we fixed. can I briefly introduce new features in the next version? Oh boy, quick rundown. So, of major new features in the update, we have 12 new buildings, mostly decorations. We have a lot of new tutorials that are going to clarify like some of the more advanced systems in the game, where previously we didn't really get into that. Um, Houses now have a much more detailed desirability display. So you can see here, you can see a home has the different tiers to reach housing upgrades. And in turn, if you hover over it, you can see a complete rundown of all the desirability factors on that house. So if there's anything positive or negative in there, you'll be able to see exactly what it's doing and how much. So if you're suddenly finding yourself that there's a home that's at risk of being abandoned, well, it turns out maybe that you built a negative building that was too close, like a mine or a compost yard. And you can actually see that in that UI now. I'm pointing over here, but that's not like you guys can see my screen. So that's one major new feature. Villager AI has received numerous upgrades. Something that got called out already. The grocers are now we had a bug that we fixed for grocers not to stock homes. They're now doing that. They're now a lot smarter about stocking the marketplace and then in turn stocking the homes. We've improved the building AI, so it's much better about redistributing its tasks. So if you have a bunch of road construction, a bunch of wall construction, a bunch of houses that need to be built, upgrades, the builders will now more intelligently spread themselves out across all these jobs. And where previously walls were considered one build site for the AI, that has been fixed. So where you might have had a huge chunk of wall, like 100 pieces of wall that needed to get built, and you might have seen like 2 villagers working on that, it would take years. Now it can get done very quickly if you have enough builders assigned. Another AI thing that's been improved, someone I think brought up fires. So previously in version 0.7.6 that you guys are currently playing, when a fire started, you would see everybody in town drop what they're doing, all their stuff lying on the ground. They'd run up to the nearest well, pick up water. A fraction of them would get to the fire, put it out, and then everybody else would be like, well, I don't need this anymore. Just drop water on the ground. So 2 things that we fixed there. First off, AI is much more intelligent about who goes to put out a fire. So instead of seeing the whole town, even villagers like way out in the middle of nowhere, run out to put out a fire, only a few people in the general area will be selected to put out that fire. And if there's any excess water, that water will no longer drop on the ground, which means if previously you had a lot of storehouses that were filling up with water, that's no longer going to be an issue. And we have one more thing coming that I'm going to see if it's going to fit into this patch or if it's going to have to be the next 0.8.1 update, is that we are improving the way villagers distribute themselves in housing. And what I mean by that is that currently the distribution does not account for where villagers work. And we're changing that, so they're going to actually think about where they're working, and so they can move to a house that's closest to where that job is, which means less time commuting, more time getting the job done. But that stuff is in the works. There's still a few kinks to work out, but either this update or next update, we're going to get that in for you guys. And there's some other things that I'll get into soon. In short, this is a major update for Farthest Frontier. There's a ton of stuff in here. I could just spend the next like 30 minutes just reading the patch notes and going through why that's an awesome change for you. If you haven't had a chance to look at it on our forum, we do actually have a playtesting forum section. There, if you register on our forum, you can enter it, and you can get the beta code to participate in the playtest, which means you can be playing version 0.8.0 right now, as long as you're okay if there may be being some bugs to work out. Nothing major. The playtest has been very smooth so far, but it's something to be aware of. And in there is the full changelog for the update, which will actually be getting updated after this stream with some of the new stuff that's still coming in. And now I need to catch up with the chat a little bit. Next update, can we build a bridge? So I talked about that earlier in the stream. Bridges and water gameplay would be something we would do post-release, most likely as an expansion of some kind. Is anyone having problems with drag mouse to target several inhabitants at the same time? Search for a harvesting tool. If you're having an issue with your mouse, I wonder if that's a hardware issue. When's the next patch? So playtest has been going very smoothly. The playtest started about a week ago now, I think. So that's going very well. We're gonna push a new version of the playtest very soon. And assuming everything's going well there, I expect that patch 0.8 will be out for everybody roughly around the middle of November. So we're talking about 2 weeks or less. I think that's the time frame we're targeting here. Have you got any ideas from a game called Frostpunk? It's personally your favorite city builder. I really like Frostpunk. I'm not I'm not sure if there's anything in particular that we looked at in there and took for ourselves, because actually when we started developing Frontier, Frostpunk wasn't even out yet. But I did play Frostpunk. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I'm looking forward to Frostpunk too, so I wish those guys luck with development, and I hope they do a good job with the sequel. Any way to reassign workers to less travel time aside from unemploying everyone, re-employing them? So I think I actually just covered that with the changes we're working on for AI. Allow skin mods. I mean, there's already a bunch of mods that are out. I don't see why a skin mod wouldn't already be possible. I think it's mostly that someone would actually have to make the skins, and that, is a lot of work in itself. Why are bars only produced at level 3? Mine's are already available at level 2. Oh, you're talking about, like, iron ingots? That's just how the progression was balanced. You can actually buy some things from the market early if that's what you want to do, but the actual smelting of them and producing your own heavy tools is a tier 3 tech. Improved performance. Can I show the FPS, please? Last I checked, and again, I will mention this is a developer build, so it actually does run slower than it does for you guys. I think I was getting about 40 FPS here in this town of a 360 population. So I mean, there's a lot of improvements to be made in terms of performance that we hope to get in there in the future. That's kind of part of what early access is for. The game gets lagging when it reaches 1,000 population. Will that be improved? Absolutely. There's a lot of optimization still to be done. Will there be a GOG version of Farthest Frontier? Not at this time. Our experience with GOG has been that it's a lot of extra work to incorporate their backend stuff and storefront stuff and all that, and not a whole ton of sales proportionally speaking. GOG is not a very big market compared to Steam, for example. So it's a little difficult to justify a GOG version, but we'll see if we'll do it in the future. I'm talking nonstop for it's only been 18 minutes. I don't need water. Have you thought about adding a law system like Frostpunk? I think that would be really cool. I don't know if we'll fit that in for the base game, but some kind of law, not just law, but like crime system, like having whenever you might have seen villagers get drunk at the pub and then someone ends up getting murdered by the hunter with an axe. I think we could build that gameplay up a little bit more, and that would be really cool to do in a potentially post-release content. Any plans to allow you to move between storage buildings in the future to limit how many we can store of an item? Yes, I think we absolutely should do something like that. It's actually one of the things we mentioned in our first State of Early Access as something we want to do. The ability to set quotas for storage buildings, so how much you want it stored in that building, and have resources get moved around. One bug that's currently in the game that I'm sure many of you are aware of is that the trading post, once stuff gets moved in there, it doesn't then go back into town storage. It is considered part of town storage, but it's sort of like this limbo state where you don't see it inside of your storehouses or stockyards, but it is available to the town. That's part of that same problem, is that there is no transfer between storage right now, and we do want to address that absolutely in the future. Any chance of shrinking some of the growing seasons for some of the crops? It'll be nice to be able to fit in the spring growing season for one crop, following one by one summer and one fall. At this point, the crop system is pretty meticulously balanced, so I'm not sure we'll be making any major changes like that. However, it is likely that we'll add new crops in the future. There's been talk of what are known as New World crops, for example, corn, that would be cool to add someday. So those might fit better into your crop rotation. Is there an average ratio of laborers workers to pop size? So if you open up your professions UI, you'll see the labor number here, and if it turns red, it actually warns you that it's below what the game thinks you should have, and that number is roughly around 10%. Any date for the update? Roughly around mid-November. Thanks for answering your questions, short. Your citizens keep getting sick because of all the waste. Well, and if you're having waste issues, you might just need more compost yards. Is there an approximate number of compost heaps needed per population? I mean, I could give you a number, but it seems like that's something you might want to figure out, It's just part of playing the game. the game's really crazy. You spend almost all day playing without realizing it's already 8 hours playing at 8 in the morning. Well then, so you played all night? Wow, I'm not sure I could pull that off anymore. That was college years for me. Staying up till 8 in the morning playing games and then sleeping till 2 on the weekend. Sneaking in Ulgrim as a villager. Well, I mean, Ulgrim is one of the villager names, I'm pretty sure. Will this be saved or posted on YouTube? You missed parts of it. Yep. So after this stream is done, we're gonna save the VOD and we're gonna put it up on YouTube, just like we've done with our previous streams. So don't feel like you missed something or you're gonna miss something if you have to leave early. Any plans on doing an FPS camera just walking around town? That'd be kind of fun. Part of the problem why we don't currently have that is that we actually don't have a skybox. So if we did that sort of camera where you could look from a villager's perspective and you looked up, you would see just black sky, which maybe is a bit ominous, but that's part of the reason why we don't currently do that. Yes, there are quite a few Grim Dawn Easter eggs in Frontier. Imagine that. Why can't we make the flatten tool go up or down? Well, it wouldn't be called a flatten tool if it could go up, but more controls for terrain might be fun. I'm not sure if we can fit that in for early access, maybe in the future. But yeah, I do see all the crazy stuff you guys have done with the sculpting of the terrain, like just starting from a big mountain and turning it into a hill fort, like really, really cool stuff. I'm impressed. Will there be a playable campaign? We are not planning to do a campaign. The game was always intended to be a sandbox experience. Sort of like City Skylines and stuff like that. One thing that's been an issue is that raiders can pretty much just climb the steep mountains, thus making the walls useless because you can't build walls on steep mountainsides. This has been fixed. Well, you can build walls on steep mountains, you just have to flatten the terrain first. But there is terrain that is too steep even for raiders to climb. We need horses in the game. Hashtag My Little Pony. Horses would be nice. More of other animals in general would be nice. Sheep, goats, chickens. Super happy with how much progress has been on the game since launch. I'm glad. I think we've squeezed out quite a few updates already. We're just getting started, obviously. This is our first, what I consider a major update with a lot of big changes coming. Is there any other requirements besides being familiar with beta software for the playtest? The only requirement is that you are aware that you're playing a beta. I mean, you're playing like a beta of a beta, because early access isn't itself a beta, and you're playing a less stable version of that. So just be aware that you might have to back up your saves. You might have to start over. But in general, our playtests are pretty stable, so it's not a huge risk. I mean, some people have opted into playtest and just stayed opted in, and it's had no negative impact on them. Thank you for doing the stream. Do you have any tips for establishing a stable food source early game? I guess I can give some tips. It would kind of depend on what your map is, because depending on what map you start on, for example, the one I started on here, I had a whole 3 berry bushes, like literally these 3 berry bushes right here. That's what my town started with in terms of foraging. So naturally, getting a forager shack was not the way I was going to feed my town. So I had to really ramp up my hunter cabins and get a meager farm on this tiny patch of land where there was still fertile land, like just barely fertile enough to plant some crops. So it went from hunters to farms for me in this case. But you might be on a map that has a lot of water, so fishing might be very viable for you. Where's the kitty? I'm supposing the kitty is behind the green screen. You're still hoping for a priority QI for laborers and builders, so far only prioritized works, but this isn't effective when there are a lot to build, so there's going to drop down. Oh, you want like a priority tier system, so like priority 1, 2, 3, 4. Maybe we'll have to see. In general, just one priority has been enough for us, but I can see why some people would want a more steady like progression of priority control. So I could see adding that in the future as a quality of life feature. When is tier 2 hunter fixed, they hunt deer and use traps at the same time. I mean, they do that. It kind of depends on how many traps you put out. So if you put out one trap, they're also going to hunt. If you put out 4 traps, they're probably going to spend a lot of their time checking those traps. So it's kind of up to you. However, we have since buffed tier 2 hunters, so small carcasses generate a lot more meat, and so the ratio of meat produced by a tier 1 hunter versus tier 2 hunter generally is in favor of a tier 2 hunter now. You're going to get more meat out of a tier 2 hunter than you used to. You played the beta version of V0.8. The immigration is very low in early game. We'll just stay in the update. We have tweaked immigration. I don't remember what the settings were for the early game. I might have to take a look at why some of you are having this issue. But I think in general, immigration is a little slower in this patch. Will the stream be up on YouTube when it ends? Yep, we're going to put it up later for you guys to be able to watch. So if you missed the beginning or you're going to miss the end, you can watch the whole thing later on YouTube. Have we discussed when you've killed raiders that have stolen something, you get it back? So if a raider steals something and you kill them, like the stuff they stole does get dropped on the ground, and laborers can then come pick it up. So that's always been the case. Can I show my food production in a city? You're always on the verge of starvation in the winter. So this is like one of the hardest maps I've ever played on. So I only have 3 months of food in winter, but 3 months is enough. So we're good. In terms of my food production, like what are you looking for? Like like what kind of distribution I have? So I have a few arborists. I did find a few patches of ground where I could plant fruit trees. Every little patch of ground that is remotely farmable is filled with fields for me, but we're talking like 50% fertility. It's really hard to get fertility up here. I have a few barns as well. That's a really good source of meat and milk and inevitably cheese. So that's kind of where my town is at right now, at a population of 360. All of that will have to be ramped up even more to get me up to 1,000. But in terms of farmland, like this map is running out of viable farmland, so I'm definitely going to have to push the other means of getting food. Can towers and barracks store weapons and armor so new soldiers don't have to walk all around the town to get it? No plans at this time to do something like that. You can store the higher tier weapons and armor in the vault. So if you place your vault near the barracks, which might make sense anyway for defending it, they'll be able to get that stuff pretty quick. There are plans to limit farming seeds, as in you need to acquire seeds before you can plant the crop. We talked about doing a system like that before. I'm not sure we're going to do it at this point. Maybe. I mean, it'd be kind of weird to retroactively add that now. Like, oh, you have access to all these crops, and then suddenly there's a patch and you don't anymore. I don't know. I'm not sure we'd do that at this point. Why do we have to figure out the capacity of the compost yard and what other capacities are clearly communicated in the UI? Not sure what you mean by capacity. So, oops, that's not a compost yard. So you're talking about these, the 3 compost piles. So each 3,600 waste becomes a pile of compost, which then gets, processed and decomposes until it becomes fertilizer for your fields. And we've changed in the last patch where if all 3 piles are completely full, your night soil collectors will still keep working. Are there any plans to add a global map view or an ability to zoom out further? So our zoom is largely capped by performance. If we let you zoom out even further, performance would actually suffer for it. I could unlock a higher zoom with a dev cheat code, and I think there's actually, I know, there's actually mods that do allow you to zoom out further, but officially these are the zooms we're planning on keeping. Thoughts on multiplayer? Our thoughts are that this is a single player game. We're not planning to add multiplayer for it. So if multiplayer is something you're looking forward to, I'm sorry to disappoint, but we're not going to add multiplayer for Frontier. You can't wait for Frontier to make enough money for more content, another Grim Dawn expansion. I mean, even if Frontier makes $1 jillion, like we're not gonna add a Grim Dawn expansion. Like that was a decision that wasn't financially driven. It was a decision based on like where we feel the game is at and where we feel the team was at. Like in terms of the game, we already added the ninth mastery, and that bloated the item stats so much and was so difficult to add that ninth mastery that the thought of adding a 10th was just seemed almost impossible without making item tooltips explode even further. We have some item tooltips that are so big that once you add a component to them or some other stuff, like you end up scrolling up and down the screen just to see the whole thing, and that doesn't feel good, and we don't want to make that worse. In terms of story, we felt that really to tell the next chapter of Grim Dawn's story, it would have to be a sequel. Like we have to kind of start with a clean slate, and maybe jump forward a few years and see where the world is at after what happens in the first game. So it wasn't like, oh my gosh, if only we made enough money, we'd be able to afford to make Grim Dawn Expansion 3. Like that wasn't the reasoning. Our team has been working on Grim Dawn for over a decade. Some people for even longer than that. And it was time for us to move on to some other projects. And we are still very much interested in Grim Dawn. For example, our RTS is going to be set in the Grim Dawn universe. But for ARPGs, we're taking a little break. We are working on a new engine that in the future can be what Grim Dawn 2 is built on. Is there an opinion to make custom maps, even with very specific terrain to play? Is that something that could be implemented in the future? I'm not sure how that would reconcile with the seed system, but you guys can share seeds. For example, if anyone wants to play on the map I'm currently playing on, the seed is right over here. So if someone wants to jot that down or pause the stream in the future, like if you want to play on this really awful map that has very little food, but a lot of raw resources like ores and coal, you can try this seed out. I've never had this many dead people and this small of a population this late into the game. Like it's year 70 and I'm at population 362. It's never taken me this long to get a population this high. So this is a brutal map, but it's fun in its own way. So if anyone is itching for a difficult experience, like this is a nice challenge. Would we provide modding tools like for Grim Dawn? We absolutely would, and we do plan to. I mean, the tools for Farthest Frontier are Unity. So if you've ever used Unity's development tools, like you will be able to use them to make mods for Farthest Frontier once we support modding. We don't officially support modding right now. There are people that have made mods. It's cool that people are so interested. I'm personally glad that there's already a thriving modding community interested in our game. I think that's great. The only caveat is that if people are using mods during early access, that they are aware that mods can cause issues that could kind of complicate us debugging a problem. So for example, if someone's having a crash or something and we're like trying to dig into it and it's like, oh, you're using a mod and that's causing the crash. Like, well, it turns out it's not a problem with the game, it's a problem with the mod. And that's why we don't really encourage modding right now, but we do want to encourage modding in the future. Can I run through the new buildings? Yeah, so why don't we dive into that? Because I'm just going through all these questions, I'm trying to catch up, and I'm not actually showing you some of the new, pretty cool new stuff. So here I've got a bunch of flattened land that I set aside just for this purpose, and we're going to enable a little cheat that will allow me to do all these buildings for free instantly, just to show you guys. So first up, we have the festival pole. This is a new entertainment building that you can place. This is the tier 1 version of it. And so it'll provide desirability and entertainment for the area. And if we upgrade it, oops, that's what it looks like. Let's put them two side by side. So that's building 1. I'm not even counting the upgrades in a total of new buildings that we're adding. One thing that I will note is that we have moved walls to the defenses category because there's a bunch of new options in terms of fencing. So this one is pretty fun. It's a hedge fence. So if you want to make a really, really swank neighborhood, this is the way to do it. So that's another set of buildings. Another set of fences we have is the wrought iron fence. And that's also very, very high end. If you have a lot of like tier 4 houses and you want to surround them with this fancy fencing. Oh, wrong one. I just did the same thing. Let's get rid of these. There we are. So this is the wrought iron fence. So if you want to surround your neighborhoods with really cool new fencing, these are your two new options. In terms of decorations, though, we have a lot of new things. We have the flagpole. Let's upgrade one of these. Look at that. So I'm already picturing you guys making some really cool new plazas. And along with that, you have new plazas with benches. Both of which can also be upgraded if you like the brick plaza instead. For those that want a bit of a more rustic look, we actually added this specifically based on your feedback, a dirt clearing. So if you want something that just like surrounds one of your barns or next to one of your marketplaces or something, like you can have this nice dirt clearing that will fit that aesthetic. Similar to that, we have barrel piles. Barrels and crates. Crates and barrels. No affiliation. And coming up next, ornamental trees. So this is a high-tier decorative building, but looks really great. Once again, it blends really well with this new stuff here. So I think you guys will be able to make some really awesome new plazas with that. Finally, we have the flower urn. Also a high-tier decorative building. So all this together, I think you guys can do some really, really cool plazas with that. So I hope you guys enjoy all these new buildings in the next update. I look forward to seeing what you guys are going to do with all this. I have seen some nice screenshots from the playtest already. Can you build a circular city in the future? We do want to add angled walls. I'm not sure if spline walls are in the cards at this point. Can you save more than one town? You can run as many towns as you want. Like the save menu supports as many saves as you want. Some kind of indication of which buildings are currently destroyed would be nice. That is something we want to actually do. Like one of the things we're working on for a future update is cleaning up and consolidating the notifications and warnings that appear in the top left of the screen. And one of those things is to let you jump to destroyed buildings really quickly to help you get them repaired. Does V0.8 include performance improvements? I think there's a few smaller performance improvements in there, like some of the UIs run a little faster. In terms of like a broad improvement, I think there's a little bit of an update for the winter time when some of the winter shaders got optimized. But I wouldn't expect anyone to get a huge bump in performance with this next update. That is, like I said though, an ongoing effort throughout early access, and we do hope to bump up your frame rates in the future. Will you add loot to raiders? Like when you kill the raider, he might have had a chance to drop gold, food, batteries, or stuff like that. So that's sort of a balancing thing. Like we don't want to make raiders feel lucrative. Like they're coming here to steal from you, not the other way around. So we don't plan to add loot from raiders. I know there's a mod that does that. That's not something we plan to do in terms of balancing the game. That would actually feel like it would make things a little too easy. Can we have a mini-map? Mini-map would be cool. I think there's a mod for that. That's something we would like to add in the future, yeah. We'll have to see, actually it would be nice to see what the mod did exactly to make that work and see if we can kind of do something similar. Like we'll have to see. Like problem with some of the way the mods do it is that they do cut corners sometimes just to make their stuff work, and that doesn't always work well for an official implementation. Like it might be a good starting point, but not necessarily be where we end up for our implementation. Is there going to be multiplayer? No plans for multiplayer. Can we not talk about Grim Dawn on this? Yeah, well, it came up. Sorry. We're Grim Dawn developers. Will Farthest Frontier be migrated to the new engine? So you're talking about the new engine we're working on. Like jumping engines like that is really a non-trivial thing to do. Like we're not gonna switch engines. It's this game is built in Unity and it's gonna stick to Unity. Am I ever gonna send my soldiers back to the barracks? I think I did. Yeah, I'm like way behind on chat here. No, I'm catching up. I'm almost there. Does the hedge fencing improve desirability? These fences do not improve desirability. That is not something we were planning to do. Is there gonna be a sandbox mode in the future? I mean, this is the sandbox mode. The game is a sandbox. Oh, just like layouts and stuff. I'm not sure. Maybe is a future quality of life thing. It's not like a feature we're actively working on or anything like that. The flagpole likes underpants. That would be a nice skin for that. Modders, get on it. When will this be available in game? So this update is coming later this month, in 2 weeks or less, I would say. Can you add a way to cycle through buildings of the same type? I'd have to think about how we could do that. But I can see why you guys might want that, yeah. What made us go from Grim Dawn to this kind of game? So we as developers love playing video games. So the games we want to work on are the games we like to play. So we like ARPGs, we like RTS games, we like town builders. So those are the games that are on the imminent horizon. So we made an RPG. Here's a town builder coming that's already in the works, and there's an RTS that's gonna be unveiled in the future. So yeah, we like to make the games we like to play. That's ultimately the motivation. And when we work on things we like to play, I mean, ultimately we are gonna put way more of ourselves into making this kind of game because we want it to be like the most fun version that we would want to play it. Any word on quarries and deep mines state of development? Keep up the good work. At this point in development, I would tell you that we are currently in the art phase. So we are working through how they're going to look visually, like how they would work visually, and kind of working on concept art for that, making the models for that, and the tech is still in the queue, if you will. So development on that hasn't started right now, but it will in the near future because that is a feature we're planning to add during early access. On Steam, you don't see a beta to opt into. So to opt into the beta, you need the beta code, which is on our playtest forum, which is on our official website. Will the RTS come to early access or will it be a full release? Given how early access has gone for Grim Dawn and how it's going so far for Frontier, I would say it's pretty likely that we're going to do early access for RTS as well. Our experience working with the community on our games has been very positive, so there's pretty much no reason not to keep that relationship going, you know? I'm not going to say that we're going to for sure do early access, but it seems very likely. AI settlements of diplomacy, like full-scale war scenarios. Oh, that would really like expand the scope of the game. Like if we ever tackle anything like that, like sort of like global settlements and stuff, I think that would have to be a DLC or something because that's a really big scope task. Do we plan to support mods more than just mentions on forums and just the community what they do for themselves? I mean, in terms of supporting mods, what we would do is kind of make sure that the hooks necessary for you guys to add stuff exist in the game code. The tools kind of already exist because it's Unity, but that's kind of where the support is from our end. Like we want to make sure that you guys are able to do the things you want to do into the game. Whereas how the mods are maintained and managed, like that's something that I feel has always been best run by the community. Like you guys put the mods where you want. We're gonna have a section on the forum for mods to get posted and discussed, like for people to announce their mod projects and stuff. We've done that for Grim Dawn, and we're gonna do that for Frontier as well when the time comes. But I'm not sure in what other way we could support mods. Are we working on the Grim Dawn game? We're working on an RTS set in the Grim Dawn universe. Any interest in a compass? You can click to reset north. You get lost easily. I don't. Maybe we could do that in the future. Like right now though, if you get lost easily, like you can press Z or whatever you rebind this hotkey to, and that will center back on your town center. what would the end game be like? Is there any plans for missions and enemy cities? So at the end of the day, this is a sandbox game, so what the end game scenario is kind of up to you. Like, we do plan to add more end game buildings. We want to add another tier of housing, more high-end buildings for you to place, and like develops like new production tracks, new decorative buildings. We have, like I mentioned, we want to implement some form of religion in the future. So that's kind of where the end game buildings will be. But in terms of what you consider an endpoint, it's a sandbox. So if you feel like your town is awesome and you've done everything you want to it, like that's kind of your endpoint, you know? Can you get a feature to automatically sell set amounts of inventory to merchants whenever they arrive? Helps with generating income early on. Well, but not every merchant is interested in the things you might be selling, so I'm not sure what you're picturing. Like force selling it to every merchant regardless of what they're interested in. I don't think we'd do a system like that. Do you have any updates on future reforestation mechanics? I kind of like the idea of decorative trees being able to spread. Um, we have some ideas for how to keep forests renewable that we're still kind of discussing the how of, but being able to maintain forests and keep lumber coming into your town is something that we want to make, functional for you guys. Like right now, it's kind of difficult at times. Like you might end up chopping down all the trees in around a work camp, and then you have to move the work camp. So that's not the most fun gameplay. So we want to address that. Talking about RTS, will there be any kind of grouping or formations for your villagers, soldiers while fighting a raid? So while Frontier does have unit selections and it does have the combat, then sort of RTS-like combat, we're not planning to make it as involved as an RTS would be. Like we're not planning to do formations and things like that. Would we possibly get shortcuts for other places like you have Z for a town center? There are actually camera shortcuts that you can set. Let's see, I forget what they are. No, I was wondering if the hotkeys appeared up in the top right, but they don't. There, if you go into the keybinds, there are, I think, 3 camera directions you can set, and if you can save and load those, and then pop back to those locations. So exactly the thing you're looking for is already in the game. There's a plan for putting additional raw material transforming lumber to coal exists. What about stone to sand or sand to clay? I'm not sure what other production lines we want to add in the future in terms of that. That might make sense in the future depending on how balance works out, but I mean, those are some of the limited resources not every map is going to have, and that's okay. You might have to trade for some of those things. So, there's one more big feature that I wanted to talk about during this live stream in terms of what we're adding for this patch. And someone might have already seen it as I was scrolling around, but something that's been a top request for Frontier that we said we were going to do, and we have it ready for this patch, and in fact, when we push the next playtest version, you guys will have access to that in the latest playtest. I'm talking about production limits. So you can see here on my firewood splitters, we have production halted icons over them, because what I did is I set a production limit. So if you select a produce item in your building UI, you'll be able to get this little pop-up that lets you control exactly how much of a resource you want in your town. So I've production limits enabled, and I set a maximum quota of 400, which means that's the amount of firewood I want in my town. The minimum is set automatically to half of this, but you can actually change it if you want. So if I want a minimum of 250, see, I changed it to 250, and now these guys are back to work. Same thing with the soffit here. I've also set a production limit. So for those of you who have been hoping for production limits all this time since the game came out, they're here. They're coming next update. I hope this gives you guys exactly what you were hoping for in terms of managing your town's resources. I know that some of you have been upset that, for example, I think it might have been windmills, like using up all your grain or things like that. Like now you'll be able to set those quotas. And with quotas, yes, does it unassign workers when the quotas are hit? Yes, exactly. So you can see that currently the occupancy in my sawmill is 0 out of 8. And that's because it's been paused. So if I raise those quotas again, these guys will get back to work. So let's actually try doing that right now. Let's see, I have 303 lumber, so let's set that minimum to 250. They're back to work. But now let's set that min quota to 200, which means I want a minimum of 200, but the maximum still hasn't been hit. So let's shrink that maximum to 300, and boom. These guys are out of here. They're back to the laborer pool. You can send them to do other things. So I think this should probably cover exactly the things you guys have been hoping for production limits. So another big feature for 0.8, production limits. I hope you guys enjoy. You hope they won't unionize. Well, thankfully there aren't unions in the Frontier. City building really doesn't interest you, but the devs did such an amazing job of Grim Dawn that you're recommending this game to everyone you know. Well, thank you. We do really appreciate that, because word of mouth is one of the better ways that, you know, a positive opinion about a game spreads. What's with job assignment then? Will idle workers become temp laborers, builders like farmers in winter? Yeah, so these guys, when they get unassigned, they get sent back to the laborer pool. And that means they can go become builders, they can go get assigned to other jobs in the meantime. So that's another layer of management you can have for your population. When is the update? It's coming the next 2 weeks. I suspect by pretty much mid-November. Any plans to add quests? For example, Bob comes to you and asks you to find his watch. He might have lost an X spot. In return, he'll give you an exclusive quest-only reward. For example, a diamond or a treasure map. Or maybe he has the ability to call a secret trader. I'm not sure about quests that are quite as explicit as that. We do have immigration quests already in the game, so that for those pop-ups you would have seen early on in the game, where the game says, "Oh, it'd be great if you built the market. A bunch of people might show up." Like, that's actually a little quest that is working in the background. So as soon as you build a market and you have enough food and housing and stuff, like, the conditions get triggered and an immigration event starts. You're actually playing both Grim Dawn and Frontier. Wasn't planned on your end, but both are great games. Good job. Well, thank you. Joe Smith got quest. Bring one more lumber to reach quota. Yeah, some form of quest like that might be fun. I'm not sure if it's in scope at this point for early access, but yeah, might be a fun feature just to add a little bit more spice to the game. Let's see, for some new stuff in this patch that I haven't mentioned yet. There's a lot of bug fixes. I'm just going down the list here. I think of the ones we mentioned, I think there's like 20 bug fixes, and then there's a bunch that we fixed that weren't even like worth mentioning because they're just small things, but adds up. Yeah, builder AI, profession window. So profession window settings, like if you have less than the maximum in a profession and you liked it that way, for example, you want less miners and you want to keep it that way when you save and load, like currently in version 0.7.6, if you load, it refills everybody. But in patch 0.8, these settings all get saved. So if you like having your miners set to something lower for a time, or you want to set your farmers to 0 for the winter, and you save and load, those settings will get maintained. You're no longer gonna like reload and have to put all your farmers back out if that's what you wanted to do. Condemned buildings can now be salvaged and relocated. So if you've got a condemned building you're having trouble with and you want to get rid of it, that's something you can do. You'll recover half of the construction materials. Cows can now graze in fields to improve their fertility, and they will also produce manure in winter. Entertainment requirements have been rebalanced, which means it'll be easier for you to make sure all your villagers are happy and entertained. Do you have any sort of time frame for early access in mind, as in early access is planned to last a year, 2 years, and when a certain goals are met? So when we started early access, we said 8 to 12 months, and that's our current goal. If we go over that, that's fine. Like, if it takes more time to bring the game up to a standard we're happy with, we're gonna take our time and do it. But our goal is to aim for roughly a year period or less. Did Banished inspire us with this game? Absolutely loved Banished. I mean, we definitely looked at Banished when we were looking into developing Frontier. Like we looked at Banished, we looked at Caesar games, we looked at Tropico. Possibilities of stuff like research, improve hunting, gathering, farming, defenses, etc. You see me like a tech tree. I think that'd be cool. I'm not sure it would be in the scope of early access, but tech tree would be fun to add. Yeah. Any DLC plans in the future? I think, as I mentioned, someone asked about bridges and stuff. I think water gameplay would be a pretty cool DLC. We're not thinking so far ahead to like, oh, the DLCs we're gonna make. Like, we're still working on the base game for you guys. Like, these are the things we're adding right now to the base game, whether you buy DLCs or not. And that's where our focus is right now. After that, then we're gonna be like, okay, what would be a cool DLC? And so that's gonna take some time to get to that point. How's CPU optimization for this update? As I mentioned earlier, that wasn't a focus of this update. This update's focus was definitely on bug fixes, quality of life, and new features. Because that's kind of the stage of development we're at. We're still adding a lot of stuff. So optimization does get trickled in here and there, but it's not like a very big push for optimization because there's stuff that's still changing in the back end that could cause optimization we do to kind of break. So like we optimize the game and then we have to re-optimize the game because something changed. Will there be festivals in the game that boost the happiness of the Frontier citizens? That would be really fun, especially with the festival poll. I think that would be a fun feature to add, like some kind of way to like set a festival you want to host, like a festival of harvest or spring festival or something like that to increase happiness or increase crop yields, things like that. That would be, I think, really cool to do. Not sure where it will fit in game development though. Sounds like this game's awesome already. It sounds like it's just gonna get better. I sure hope so. Are we going to be adding vineyards? That is actually one of the buildings we've talked about in our recent chat about like what buildings we're planning to add in the future. It wasn't like top of the list, but I think it'd be pretty fun to have vineyards and wineries, and then potentially having grapes be another item for the preservist. People forget this is early access still. Grim Dawn used to have 3 acts when you first picked it up. I like to mention that when Grim Dawn first released in early access, it had 1 act. 1. And that was the scope of the game. Like we were going to have 1 big act and that was going to be the game. Because we're a very small studio back then with a very limited budget, but early access did so well that we just kept expanding the scope, and while early access did end up taking a lot longer than we planned, the game ended up huge because of it. Like we released with 4 acts instead of the 1 we originally planned, and a lot more features. Can I talk about the next big update after 0.8? No, I cannot. I'm sure you'd love for me to, but it's too early to talk about that. I can tell you the stuff that's coming in this update. I can tell you that the next update after that, there's an AI thing that either slips into this update or the next one, as I mentioned, with how villagers disperse themselves in terms of where they live, so they live closer to where they work. But what's coming after that in next 0.9 update, well, we'll talk about them when the time's right. Are the different sized gravestones random or relative to who died? Oh, so you mean like in here, where you've got gravestones and they seem to be getting nicer and nicer? Well, that's actually a nice little detail that we snuck in regarding your population. So as your town progresses and your houses get nicer and nicer, the gravestones get nicer too. So if a villager who was living in a large home passes away, they will have a nicer gravestone because they had a little bit more money. Whereas at the beginning, when your people were just starting out, barely surviving in the wilderness, like that, this is when you had these tiny little broken gravestones that are a little worn out. Just a little touch of progression. What's my personal favorite item feature improvement coming in the next update? I don't know. I don't know if I'd have to pick a favorite. I mean, the decorative buildings are super fun. I had a great time. Like when we first revealed them in the State of Early Access 2 update, and I was kind of designing like a nice little area with the new decorations. Like that was super fun for me. So that's great. I love the improvements to the housing UI. Like this was great. I think having this breakdown is super convenient. And like one of those little things that irked me like to no end was when these guys would drop all their buckets all over town every time there was a fire. Like it was just bothering me so much. Like like every time there was a fire, the roads would be flooded with water, and now that's gone. That's not a thing anymore. Like that, it's such a small thing that feels so good that it's been fixed. Crate's art team did an amazing job with this. I agree. You hearing that, Scott? They like your art. Is there a rat infestation mechanic currently? If you neglect to build a rat catcher, why don't you neglect to build a rat catcher and find out? Our host is going to feature in 1.0. That'd be the sort of thing will be featured in a DLC. I can't say when or if we'll be adding horses. I think that would be a cool thing to add. I don't know when or if it will happen. So I'm not going to promise like, oh, horses are coming in 1.0. Oh, great. Now someone's going to clip that out of context. You love the gravestone thing, but you love the new fences, but why are they so expensive and not have desirability? So the main thing is for desirability is that it would actually be a huge performance cost in terms of how desirability is calculated. Like all those one-by-one buildings, like plazas and the fence pieces, have a huge tax on how desirability is calculated. Like each of those little things has to get processed. So the more tiny little buildings that are providing desirability, the more it's going to tax your system. So we opted not to have one-by-one buildings affect desirability for that reason. And ultimately, these are decorative buildings that are supposed to make your town look awesome. That's why they're expensive. It's sort of like an end-game decoration. Any plans on changing how the luxury items are distributed around? You're having problems getting enough glass to preserve food because people take it all. Well, I guess that kind of depends on what you. Oh, you're talking like limiting what luxury buildings or sorry, what luxury goods get put into houses. So we don't currently have a plan to limit villagers taking glass into homes, if that's what you mean. So I guess in that scenario where you're having trouble making enough glass for both homes and preserves, you might just have to produce more glass. And we did tweak the cost of glass to preserves. I think it was like 1 to 8 in 0.7.6. It's now 1 to 15. And we reduced the amount of sand it takes per glass. So you should have an easier time with that exact issue. Are there plans for more music? While the music in the game is good, let's get a better friend. Did you already ask this question? I feel like you did. Yeah, more music. I mean, more of everything is always great. There's no downsides to having more music. It's not sure how many more tracks we would add at this point, though. Your biggest colony so far is 700 people. Awesome. That 700 is quite an achievement, especially for a new player. Hello. Let's see. In terms of other new features that I didn't mention yet, wall tool now has a priority option. So if you place some new walls, what is that card doing? If you place some new walls, you can press prioritize. Oop, and that's a tag we need to fix. Nice. I could have sworn that tag was already in the game. I'm gonna clip that for myself because I need to remember that happened. I could have sworn that tag was already in the game. But yes, that's a new feature you guys have access to, and I showed you a bug right on stream. Great. But we'll fix that for release. Easy fix. Just a missing tag. Yeah, so if you guys are having issues with getting your walls prioritized for building, like you'll be able to just select the whole chunk of wall, click prioritize, one click, done. When you're placing new decoration buildings, you're going to see not only the total desirability, but also the change in desirability. So for example, if I built this large statue right over here next to this house, that house would get plus 11%. So it's a lot less math involved in figuring out like, wait, how much am I getting from this? Like, the game does it for you now. Yeah, there's been some balance changes. Cows now automatically produce milk. You don't have to enable or disable it in the barn. It's just they make milk. There's no more like forgetting that you relocated a barn and you have to re-enable milking and you forgot and your town's not making milk anymore. Like that's not an issue anymore. Not sure if you saw this correctly, but there are now ways to raise ponds and lakes. There are not ways to raise water at this time. Other plans to expand the factions in the games and where the traders come from, diplomacy, etc. As I mentioned in an earlier question, like it's sort of like diplomacy or global system would be a pretty big undertaking, so I'm not sure that would really happen at this point. Like, there'd be potentially a cool DLC to have the game have this grander scope of like a world around you, like there's other settlements, other lords that are vying for your lands. That'd be really cool. But that's a big thing. Will the cobbler, cheesemaker, tannery, etc. be getting upgrades? We're not planning upgrades for those buildings. If you need more of them, you can always make another one. Turn caught rats to waste compost? No, I don't think we'll be planning to do that. Is that a thing? That thing rat catchers do? Better yet, meat. Plague meat. Mmm. Right, there's been some tuning changes, so some tuning to how gold is generated, because people are ending up with way too much gold in the end game. Raiders are going to be tougher on Vanquisher difficulty, but easier on Pioneer and Trailblazer. When is level 5 Town Hall and Homes coming? I don't know if we'll be adding a level 5 Town Hall, but we are adding tier 5 homes in the future. It's on the list. It's coming in the future. I don't have like an exact date for you, but yeah, sometime in early access you're gonna see more new buildings. You've played 200 hours since mid-August. Biggest settlement so far, 1,005. Having a really hard time getting higher. Been around there for about 10 years. Is there a maximum population? So what you've done is you've hit the soft cap for population that we set for early access for performance reasons. That cap is going to be removed in the future, but yeah, right now you are capped at 1,000. Any plans for things like decorative grasses as wild natural decorations similar to new dirt garden you demonstrated? Oh, actually, that might make sense. Yeah, like sort of like a grass clearing or like a campus. Village green. Yeah, that might make sense. Thank you for answering your questions. No problem. Like, that's why I'm here. Hope you guys are enjoying this preview and that it's been helpful. Will the tier 5 homes be multiple stories high? Let's see. If you go to our website and go to the game guide, on there is a concept piece for our tier 5 homes. So that's a little sneak preview. Is there a year limit to the game? There's not a year limit. I think someone's been running a town for 285 years or something crazy like that. It would be great if buildings like Healer School, for example, wouldn't have a desirability range, so you're not forced to build them in every living quarter part of your town, but to have all the buildings upgrade. I'm kind of forced to build a second school, second theater, and so on. I mean, that's kind of part of the gameplay, though. And having more than one school for your town as it gets bigger, I mean, that kind of does make sense, don't you think? But since there's a lot more desirability buildings being added, you do have alternatives to how you increase your desirability. So the festival pole, the upgraded festival pole, like the ornamental trees, ornamental urns, like all the flagpoles, all that stuff, are other ways to increase desirability in your area. So if you don't want to make a school in every neighborhood, you could fill it with flagpoles, I suppose, or some other things like that. Any improvements to storage, choose limits and priority would be great. Improving storage controls is something we'd like to do in the future, yeah. For example, letting you redistribute resources between storage buildings. Set quotas for how much a building is supposed to keep. Would it be possible to rotate buildings on a diagonal like we can use the roads? We're not planning to go off grid for building placement, if that's what you mean. Like that, the whole point of our grid is to make building placement seamless and easy, and adding another degree of rotation in there would complicate things in ways that we didn't want to do. Like we tried free placement during development, like early on, and we as a team preferred a grid system. I understand that's not for everybody, and I understand that there's games that do it differently, but that's part of game development, is that you're not gonna please everybody, and that's the beauty of games too, is that you have options. If you like if that's a system you really like and it's like a deal breaker for you, there are town builders that do free placement. But we focus on a grid, and we wanted that to play and feel well. And in terms of how some buildings are designed visually, the Cobbler is a good example. Like, they do have some of these angles and little bits of plaza that do work well with angled roads. Are free laborers able to auto-assign to different roles? So if you set production limits like I have here, like if that production limit gets reactivated and they're supposed to go back to work, those laborers will automatically go back in to those firewood splitters. So I can even show you an example here. I'm gonna set that limit back. Let's see, I have 342 firewood. I'm gonna set my minimum to 350, and watch, they're all back to work automatically. You don't have to do anything besides just setting those limits. So as long as the laborers are available, so you have to make sure your labor pool is large enough to accommodate it. But yeah, they will automatically get into those positions. Do citizens living in undesired parts of town get jealous? I like to imagine they do. I mean, when you're living next to the compost yard, like this guy here. I know he's actually just out of range. Look at that. But yeah, when you're living next to the compost yard, when the other people are living next to statues, I feel like there must be a little pang of jealousy there. Nice limits edition. Yeah, I mean, if for those of you that wanted production limits, I think this patch is going to be great. Why can't we relocate the town hall without delete rebuild? Well, for one, you're not really supposed to be able to delete it in the first place. That's not a feature. That's a bug that we need to address. The town hall was never meant to be relocated. It's supposed to be the founding building of your town. That was kind of the gameplay mechanic there. So we're going to be wrapping up the stream here in a few minutes. Are there any last minute questions? Anything you guys want me to show you again, or that you might have missed earlier in the stream? For example, these are all the new buildings we're adding to the game this update for your decorative needs. Will more storage carts be a feature at some point? Storage carts, you mean like the one you start with? So that's sort of a flavor bit. Like these guys, that's supposed to be how your people got here, how they settled in the frontier. And what we want to do is we actually want to add a means for you to turn this storage cart into something else. So once you don't need it anymore, you can, build it into either a storehouse, a stockyard, or maybe what might be kind of cool is like a monument commemorating your people moving into the frontier and settling and surviving. So that might be a fun thing to transform it to. Do we have plans for developing walls into something more realistic, medieval, with like towers and parts of it archers on it rather than symbolic current ones? You're talking about having villagers actually standing on top of walls. So that would be a big complexity in terms of pathing. I'm not sure how feasible that would be at this point. I mean, it would be possible with a lot of development time, like changing how pathing works, but having villagers pathing on top of walls might get tricky. With plazas being nicer and nicer, will there be some events to start town-wide festivities? So as I mentioned earlier in the stream, having some sort of festivals, like a harvest festival or a spring festival, things like that, summer solstice kind of stuff, might be cool. I don't know when and if we'll add that, but it would be a fun feature to have. In Frostpunk, when you build multiple same type buildings next to each other, they automatically merge together, make it look like one big building. Any plans to do the same in this game? You know what? I've played so much Frostpunk and I never even noticed that was a feature. That's pretty cool, but that's not something we're planning to do, no. That's not how the tech for the buildings was created. So I mean, part of it is in Frostpunk, I don't think people physically work in buildings. I think it's sort of like a vague system, right? It's been a while since I played that game. But in here, like every villager is physically working in a building. So if buildings started to merge, then our UI would have to account for, more villagers working in them. Then you might have to have a building that was 4 workers, now suddenly it's 12. Like that might get crazy. Keep up the great work. Enjoying it a lot. It's so pretty with the trees and everything. Well, I'm glad you like our work. Bridges when? Well, hopefully someday in a bridge DLC or water gameplay DLC. Statues that only unlock after completing a certain thing, like population or raid, would be good. Yeah, I think some kind of commemorative events that you can immortalize like in a statue would be kind of fun. When will the 0.8 update go live? Later this month, in probably 2 weeks or less. Is the beta code live? So the playtest is live currently. There's going to be an update to it later today, hopefully. That's going to add a bunch of new stuff that we've been working on. For example, these production limits that I showed you guys, that's not in the playtest yet, but it will be once we update the playtest. Alright, any final questions, final burning questions for this update? So this is patch 0.8 that's coming later this month. We're super pumped to get this in your hands. It's a really big update for Frontier. Tons of bug fixes, tons of new features, quality of life improvements, new buildings, great AI improvements, ton of great stuff you guys have been asking for, and some of the things you didn't even realize you wanted. Fishing shacks should upgrade to send out boats. I mean, that's exactly what I mean by water gameplay. Like that would be something we would add if we do like bridges and water and stuff like ships. Any plans for performance patches? Yep, that's something we're working on in early access. You're conflicted. You keep playing or wait for the update. Well, if you absolutely cannot wait, you can opt into the playtest and play it today. Any update on Plushie the Second? I showed this earlier in the stream. If you are interested in Plushie the Second, I am holding it right here. This lovely Chthonian Devourer could be yours when the campaign starts, I think, next week. So you guys will be able to back it and get your own. Implement a bonus item if you have Grimdawn save data. Well, but Scorv's already there for you. What more do you need? Glad you didn't miss the stream. Thanks, we've done a great job. You love the game. I'm glad you're enjoying it. It's really nice to be hearing from you guys that you're enjoying this stuff, because that's, I mean, at the end of the day, like, part of why we're doing all this is to give you guys a game you enjoyed playing as well. We like to see the ability to select all of one type of building to make them easier to see at once. So that's kind of a thing already, except it's not in for all buildings. So you can see if I select the market, all the other markets get highlighted. And some buildings don't currently do that. It's inconsistent. We do want to fix that. You're 60 hours into the game, you feel like you're just cracking it. Yeah, like it takes some time to get into it. When I first switched to this project years ago, and like I started getting into it, like it took me a while to get like a good town going and figure it all out. You actually signed up for Twitch to watch this. Great stuff so far. Awesome. And I guess you're welcome, Twitch. So once again, thank you guys for coming by today. If you came in later, this stream will be up on YouTube later today. And we'll be getting back to work here to make sure that patch 0.8 is as awesome as it can be for you guys. One last question here. When did development start on this game? Oh, man. I think it was 2015 or 2016 when we first started working on Frontier. I've lost track. It's been a while. But it's been a good ride, and here we are now, actually, with people playing the game. So that's kind of the end game for game development. It's like, people are here, they're playing it, it's awesome. So again, thank you guys for stopping by. Hope you enjoyed the stream. Take care and see you next time.